Hello, my name is Tolg and I exist, therefore I think too much. I am reading Fred's work Beyond Good and Evil, and I rant, which means that I only read like 2 points at a time. I'm on chapter 20. No, I'm not. Jesus Christ. Sorry. I'm on chapter 2 and I'm at points 30 and probably just 31 today. And therein, having said that, I read 2 points at a time because I rant, and in ranting I cuss, and if you don't like cussing, you don't have to watch this. Generally, I guess that's a rule at all, you don't have to watch this. You have free will. Use it, go do things that make you feel alright. That's maybe a rant worth having. I don't know. We'll decide after I have it. So there's this thing that I am very well acquainted with, not necessarily because I participate in it. It's called contempt porn. And, maybe I had to understand it existed like a few years ago, but, things become addicting to watch because you hate it. And I do not think enough appreciation in life is given over to the understanding that humans are a computer. We exist. Our coding exists like the chemical input and chemical output. And that is what we react and what we act on. Contempt porn relies on your dopamine and adrenaline being wired to your hatred. Watching something, giving energy to something because you hate it, you are addicted. You are getting high off of pain. Something that makes you feel bad. You have wired your pain to be pleasure. You're not mentally well. Like, that's ill as fuck. Figure your shit out. Get help. Kidoki. So, having said that, point 30. Oh, yeah, I guess up to this point. My opinion of Nietzsche, which is, someone pointed out this bit of work, is, towards when he starts becoming, what's the word for it? I wanted to say intrusive, and that's not right. Introspective, out of fear and loathing. Isn't that a book too? Fear and Loathing? No, that has to be a movie. I don't know. Personally, I believe that he felt threatened by the introduction of psychology. He was born in 1840, meaning he probably wrote this anywhere from 1860 to 1890. And the early sciences would have been a huge fashion. It would have been fashionable, rather, to talk about it. And so someone in philosophy may have not only felt threatened by their peers in a need to procure money, but then also by an introduction of a new science that could step on philosophy's field, I guess, validity. Which would further, his general hatred. He seems, in this book, very, very, very embittered. The first one was something, he was supposed to be discussing what philosophy and philosophers in general are predisposed to. Not predisposed to, there's a word for that. The prejudices Philosophers was the first chapter, at which point he just talks about how prejudiced he is towards philosophers. Now it's discussing the free spirit, and I have yet to understand what he intends to mean by the free spirit. I don't know if he knows. So, there's that. So, point 30, our deepest insights must and should appear as follies. Holy shit. Our deepest understandings must appear as an accident, a fuck up. I guess that could be in line with to think you know anything is to be stupid. The most knowledgeable knows they know not. And one of my favorite quotes, not necessarily relevant, maybe slightly only in the word folly being used, but my favorite quote is, "It is folly of man to forget what it was to be young." Our deepest insights must and should appear as follies, and under certain circumstances as crimes. Wow. When they come unauthorizedly to the ears of those who are not disposed and predestined for them. Do not cast your pearls amongst swine. I once asked why, and it's because pigs eat anything, and they don't care about the value of it. There's a rant. Value is subjective per the individual. It is not an objective truth. If you read The Prince by whomever the fuck the prince is by, it discusses utopia. Oh, I don't mean The Prince. Whoopsie daisy. I mean Utopia. By Thomas More. It discusses the place called Utopia, in which they utilize jewels as toys of babies and children. They don't hold value because they come from the ground and they're abundant. And so in life, the people working there find them pretty, but don't trade with them. And so when dignitaries of other countries come in adorning themselves with rubies and pearls, they think that they are being childish because the value does not translate to their community. They think they're playing with babies' toys. Do not cast your pearls among swine. You do not know how those pearls are going to be received. In fact, if we're discussing pigs, they're known for decorating their pens with flowers. The Jesus' balls. The exoteric and the esoteric, as they were formerly distinguished by philosophers among the Indians, I hope India, as among the Greeks, Persians, and Musulmans. Recently I understood Musulmans as indicating a specific peoples of the Middle East, but I do not remember which ones. Well, that's gone from my brain, unfortunately. In short, wherever people believed in gradations. I am so not saying that right, and it bothers me. Different grades of rank, and not inequality and equal rights, equity rather than equality is better, are not so much in contradistinction. Holy shit. Was that word necessary? Why not contradiction? To one another in respect to the exoteric class. If esoteric is as metaphysical is understood to be, then exoteric is what is physical? Is that how it is? I will find out when I edit this. Standing without and viewing, estimating, measuring, and judging from the outside and not from the inside, the more essential distinction is that the class in question views things from below upwards. That cannot be a place, that is a direction. To be able to observe is to exist outside of what you are observing. from the outside looking in, or cannot see the forest for the trees? Which one is more relative to what is being said? Well, the esoteric class views things from above downwards. I will make sense of this later. I think, what's confusing me is the lack of the word looking. Being from above, looking downwards. Or observing downwards. So is esoteric not being used as I understand esoteric? Rank and class in consideration to esoteric and exoteric. If esoteric is metaphysical, then this... Is this meaning to place those of esoteric ideation as more important? There are heights of the soul from which tragedy itself no longer appears to operate tragically, says the most depressed man ever. Recently I was talking to a friend, and they didn't know this feeling, and I had taken it for granted that this feeling, if you start talking about the abuses you've suffered, you'll always run into people who say, well, you know nothing, these are the abuses I have suffered. And if you do that enough times, you end up hearing everybody's woes, and it becomes, oh, everybody goes through something. So I generally just take what I go through for granted, and I accept it as a generality rather than an exception. It takes someone standing out and going, no, that is exceptional, that's not normal. But dealing with something emotional, or rather the lack of dealing with it, when your body cannot suffer itself to feel, so you can process logically the information pertaining to something, but the emotions aren't there. And it's not necessarily something you should feel good about, but you don't have the ability to feel. Because if you started to feel about it, it'd be too much to process. More than I think a body can. And I guess that doesn't necessarily translate all the time. But that's what this gives off. Tragedy itself no longer appears to operate tragically. The inability to process what you're going through because you're just numb to it. You can't afford it anymore. Can't afford to be broken so frequently. And if all the woe in the world were taken together, who would dare to decide whether the sight of it would necessarily seduce and constrain to sympathy, and thus to a doubling of the woe? Oh, is sympathy always of negative impact? If you were to feel sympathetic towards someone, does that necessarily mean that you are only sympathetic to their negativity that they suffer? Can't you be sympathetic towards someone's positive aspects in life? You can be sympathetic toward their gains. It's just being able to properly assess and understand and appreciate. That which serves the higher class of men for nourishment or refreshment must be almost poison to an entirely different and lower order of human beings. Is he calling the higher class psychopathic? The virtues of the common man would perhaps mean vice and weakness in a philosopher. If the philosopher processes so much he can no longer process anything anymore, can't afford to. And if a higher man is considered a higher rank, like a general in an army, rather than a footman, having to make the decision, do I kill 20 squadrons, or do I move forward in moving into a country to take over their oil rigs? and it being a decision you have to make over dinner that night and come to work the next day, then yes, lower men would not be able to perceive of it, and it would hurt them. Those in positions of power cannot hold the same virtues those who are not in power do. At least that has been said. Weakness in a philosopher. It might be possible for a highly developed man, supposing him to degenerate and go to ruin, to acquire qualities thereby alone, for the sake of which he would have to be honored as a saint in the lower world into which he had sunk. Describing an intellectual who's broken onto his own understanding so much so that he's incapable of performing anymore in a means to get money, so sinks below being able to make money, falls to poverty, and in poverty is honored as someone with knowledge. The nail that stands above will be hammered, and those around will feel the impact. There are books which have an inverse value for the soul and the health according as the inferior soul and the lower vitality. 50 Shades of Grey. Or the higher and more powerful make use of them. In the former case, they are dangerous, disturbing, unsettling books. 50 Shades of Grey. In the latter case, they are herald calls, which summon the bravest to their bravery. 50 Shades of Grey? Books for the general reader are always ill-smelling books. I'd have to be in his head to understand what the fuck this is about. The odor of paltry people clings to them. Okay, this could very well be, I was making jokes prior, but this could be, back in the day, and I don't know if this is relevant to, the 17th century, no, sorry, the 19th century, yeah, that would be right, wouldn't it? I think so. But when books were, I want to say invented, but they've always been there, so I'm not sure when it started. But I do know in England, I want to say Victorian England, it was a common thing. No, it was older than Victorian, but it was common to see, especially the youth, in books and newspaper. You got your gossip through newspaper, and gossip led, society, who's going to make deals with whom, who should avoid whom, that type of thing. So you wanted to be on the money, you followed the gossip columns. And books were insulted sometimes as one could not think for themselves. They needed to be provided thoughts to ponder, and it was seen as, common day sees telephones. Someone being perpetually in their phone is rude, is seen as limiting yourself. However, it's a library of knowledge if you utilize it right. So I think this is implying exactly that. If it's the right book, it can benefit you. If it's the wrong book, it can harm you. If you're looking up the right things on your phone, it can benefit you if you use your phone like a computer, versus if you let the computer use you. If you let the algorithm take you into a weird place, down a rabbit hole, so to speak, you could really fuck yourself up by it. I think this is what that means, except he's using very demeaning words. Paltry. Merp. Where the populace eat and drink, and even where they reverence, it is accustomed to stink. Oh, okay. One should not go into churches if one wishes to breathe pure air. I mean, There is something to be said of anxiety sweats, and going to church. A lot of people went to church just to pray, just to feel comfort. So people do give off smells the people give off different chemicals per the emotions they're going through. So depression can give off chemicals, anxiety can give off chemicals, and maybe he was so cursed as to be able to smell everybody like that. Jesus, bloodhound. That would be miserable. I mean, talk about being a philosopher, having to observe absolutely everything under the sun to be able to garner a paycheck, and then right after that also smelling everybody for what they smell like in a confined space. Ugh. Ugh. Misery. Okay, sorry. 30.31. In our youthful years, we still venerate and despise without the art of nuance. Oh, well, people are doing that even when they're old now. Which is the best gain of life. Nuance is the best gain of life? Okay. And we have rightly to do hard penance for having fallen upon men and things with yea and nay. Okie dokie. Everything is so arranged that the worst of all tastes, the taste for the unconditional, that which simply is and does not rely on conditions to exist. The black and white? The worst of all taste? Is cruelly befooled and abused until a man learns to introduce a little art into his sentiments. And I assume that art is nuance, and prefers to try conclusions with the artificial, as do the real artists of life. I think that is why a lot of people play devil's advocacy, argue the other side. Not only how do I put this into words? Arguing the other side permits one to understand, hopefully help themselves, maybe even others, but help themselves primarily understand nuance if it can be provided the situation. I do think that arguing the other side, devil's advocacy, is I want to say abused when people believe that debate is fighting rather than arguing, and the difference between fighting and arguing is the opposition of viewpoints and, coming together to discuss it, to meet an end, that end being that you either agree to disagree, or that you learn one or the other way, whichever opposing viewpoint made most sense. And fighting is essentially shaming, bullying, being aggressive in how you address something so that the other person backs down. That is not a win, and I can't in that way say that it's a loss either. It's just extending the misunderstanding, the inability to communicate. It's not a sign of good intellect, high intellect. And I think most debate clubs teach one to fight, to win, quote unquote, rather than to properly argue. And the understanding nuance would be a means by which one could provide themselves, let me give ground to the opposition. Maybe there is means by which they are right, and both parties ought to be doing that. Am I wrong? How could I be wrong? Is this a way in which I'm wrong? Both parties should be seeking to understand what is right and what is truthful, rather than be seeking themselves to be right, if that can make sense of itself. The angry and reverent spirit peculiar to youth appears to allow itself no peace until it has suitably falsified men and things to be able to vent its passion upon them. I wonder if he's now describing what I just said. I don't know. Youth in itself even is something falsifying and deceptive. Okie dokie. I have 3 copies of The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's one of my other favorite books, and that's why I have 3 copies of it. I think I have like two or 3 copies of Wuthering Heights as well, and 2 copies of Great Expectations. I have problems, but at least 2 of the pictures of Dorian Gray are unabridged, and if you're going to read Dorian Gray, you should absolutely read the unabridged. The abridged one shouldn't have even been printed. It leaves so much out. It's not worth reading. Read the unabridged version of The Picture of Dorian Gray. I believe that's what this is alluding to. Later on, when the young soul, tortured by continual disillusions, finally turns suspiciously against itself, still ardent and savage, even in its suspicion and remorse of conscience, how it upbraids itself, how impatiently it tears itself, how it revenges itself for its long self-blinding, as though it had been a voluntary blindness. Ooh, this is exactly the picture of the picture of Dorian Gray. In this transition, one punishes oneself by distrust of one's sentiments. Why not? Humans spend a lot of time trying to fit in, to have community, to survive, when I think it would be well worth someone's time to figure out what they would want to be. Instead of trying to create themselves to be accepted, one could create themselves to feel fulfilled. And then this wouldn't happen. Distrusting one's sentiments, one tortures one's enthusiasm with doubt. You wouldn't have this incredible self-hatred. You'd be able to stand by yourself if you took time to learn who you are, who you want to be, what you do stand by, ethically, morally, artistically. Grow a spine. Hold yourself accountable. Grow into who you should be and who you want to be, rather than what you assume others want of you. The latter is miserable, and I think in it being miserable, misery loves company. One feels even the good conscience to be a danger, as if it were the self-concealment and lassitude of a more refined uprightness, as someone who is capable of being themselves is now judging you because you did not become yourself. Oy, what a jail. Why choose to live that way? And above all, one espouses upon principle the cause against youth. A decade later, and one comprehends that all this was also still youth. The reason society for a minute was addicted to the manic pixie dream girl, and, key part of that is manic, is because that archetype of person was so upsetting, not in a angering way, but like a still water is upset by a leaf dropping on it. It was so upsetting to the normality of everybody's humdrum expectations. The manic part of it, highs and lows being all over the place, and living a life attempting to account for these highs and the lows, the pixie dream girl part. That was so romanticized because people didn't like following the boring pattern laid out for them. Which I think bred, a certain type of illness, like a certain type of addiction into society of looking for people who are mentally ill because they'll break up your humdrum. Sure, fine, whatever floats your boat. I just think it's really wildly unhealthy. And if you're addicted to other people's mental illnesses, or in fact addicted to being mentally ill yourself, life isn't going to be easy. Maybe that's what you want. Some people really like whitewater rafting. There are just better ways to go about breaking up the humdrum. Take a fucking hike, literally. Like, go get high on endorphins. Take pictures. Get into photography. Take swing classes. There are healthy means by which you don't have to be bored with yourself. Go grow as a person. Stop taking it out on everybody else when you are addicted to mentally ill people and then turning around and demanding that they be less mentally ill. Or when you are mentally ill and you're addicted to your own mental illness and turning around and demanding that everybody else settle for it rather than growing to be healthy. Society has gotten to a weird point where people don't enjoy their patterns, so they try to break them up. I just think there are better means to break these patterns, rather than pointedly being upsetting. Yeah, that's it. Have fun, enjoy your life, eat well, drink well, sleep well. Especially sleep well. Get good sleep. Bye.